My name is Alistair Cockburn. It's a Scottish name, and the CK is not pronounced, so it's Cockburn. In Scotland and in Australia, they know how to pronounce it, and everywhere else in the world, they have to teach people. So it's Alistair Cockburn. I got started on my third career in 1991. I was hired to write a methodology for object-oriented programming for IBM. I knew nothing. And my boss bought me unlimited airplane tickets all over the world to interview projects. So I interviewed and just said what works, what doesn't work. And out of that, I got in the 90s a very simple description of how to work on small teams, which is that you just put a few people in a room, you leave them alone, give them access to the customer, they deliver, they think about it, and they change their stuff, and that's it. It's very hard to write a methodology with that. But that was me in the 90s, and then we wrote the Manifesto in 2001. I'm now an independent consultant, and in 2015, I was challenged to simplify it to 4 words, which is now the Heart of Agile, and we could talk about that. So my continuous history in this effort is now, 35 years, which is, so I'm kind of like a historical artifact or historian, and I tell stories of the olden days, in the 90s and the precursor to the Agile. And I also travel around the world and I tell people what's happening in other parts of the world today. So the proper description of my profession is a bard, because a bard used to do that. They would tell the legends of the olden days and what's happening in the other towns, what the current fashions are. And that's exactly what I do. That's me. So in 2001, we wrote this fairly short thing called the Manifesto. It's got like 4 sentences to it, and it says there's values. We value this over that 4 times. And at that time, it was considered short, but attention span has gotten even shorter, and nobody these days reads a compound sentence. Like if it's got a subject, a verb, and a direct object, and then a comma, they're done and out. So in 2015, I was challenged by a friend to do some simplification and find a fresh way of approaching this. I ended up choosing just 4 verbs. Collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. So you collaborate to deliver, you reflect to improve. And in fact, that's all you need. And people who were around in the 90s, Ron Jeffries, Chet Hendrickson, and so on, found that this was in the 20-teens a better way to say what is Agile, that they couldn't go to all the words, it's full of words. The Agile man is full of words. So we can't be reading all those words. It's got commas and semicolons, and I can't do that. But if you just have these 4 words, collaborate to deliver, reflect to improve, you actually get all of the Agile stuff in there. Now what's important is, you might ask about the Scrum values or the values in the Manifesto. Notice their values. They don't tell you what to do. They're a standing point. I stand here where the values are this, and I stand here but that doesn't tell you what to do. It's too vague. So with the Heart of Agile, I made them imperative verbs. Collaborate, don't ask me what to do. Collaborate, right? Deliver, don't say what's the definition. Deliver, right? It's like that. Stop, reflect, pause, breathe, right? Improve, right? So these are specific commands. They're imperatives. They're not just, I think it's good that we collaborate. No, collaborate, like that. The next thing that's good and was important to me in 2015 is to take it outside of software. We've been trying to take this outside of software since at least 2003, but we're trapped by the Manifesto talking about products and software and so on. But if we say collaborate to deliver, and by the way, you have to get feedback right there, which is, the reason feedback isn't there is because it's not a verb, and it's 5 things. But collaborate to deliver, reflect to improve doesn't reference what you're working on. So it now applies to any initiative, org transformation, trying to get people to recycle, solar energy. We're looking at villages in Patagonia or in Africa who are trying to do something with water or something, some social projects. They haven't got time for principles, values, scrum masters, impediments, none of that. You have to use words dead simple. And the way you take this out of software is you replace any reference to work product with a reference to decisions. Once you talk about the flow of decisions in an organization, now you can apply this to any human endeavor whatsoever, because in any organization, top level people are making strategic decisions and other people are making detailed decisions. When you operate on the flow of decisions in an organization, now you can apply all of Lean, Kanban, Agile, everything, actually without any change. You just don't ever talk about work products. You talk about who makes what decisions, what's the backlog of decisions, even if it's a press release, anything you deliver into the world is the sort of concretization of a set of decisions made by a bunch of people. So now we operate on the decisions, and now we can take the general ideas of the Agile Manifesto, also Toyota Production, Lean, all that stuff, and apply them to any endeavor whatsoever. So this is very nice. It's in a sense both simpler, easier to access, and also more applicable. So that was 2015. It's now been 10 years. And with AI, what's left with AI? Why are we doing sprints? What is this 2-week sprint thing with AI when a sprint is, like 10 minutes or 30 minutes? Well, you still need to collaborate, and you talk, how is AI going to change the way decisions are made? How is AI going to change the collaboration? Deliveries are now like twice a morning. But when we get to the feedback, if you deliver that often, how are you getting now the feedback? Still have to reflect. The AI can help you reflect, in fact, but the improve now is going to be pretty much up to you, right? So with these 4 words, we can incorporate radical changes like AI. We still have the basic 4 words: collaborate, to deliver, reflect, to improve. That's the heart of Agile, and it's nicely withstanding sort of the onslaught of AI and still gives us something useful to work with. So that's the heart of Agile. In the early 2000s, I ran a roundtable in Salt Lake City. We called it the Agile Roundtable. We met every month, actually, from like 1999 until 2017. So this group of people met every month, became experts on everything. We read everything. We discussed everything. Somewhere around, 2008 or 9, I had learned how to do nano-incremental development. I do acceptance test-driven design. I don't design big systems, but I learned how to make 2 to 5 lines of code have an effect that's visible at the end screen. And I learned that because in 1999, I was trying to learn a JavaScript for my website, and I didn't know JavaScript, so I was doing some kind of a graphical hierarchical program thingy. I found one that was similar, and I would change the lines of code, but my editing environment was Edit. And Edit has one Control Z, one undo, right? So I had to learn how to write one little cluster of lines of code, and if I didn't work, I just undid it and then try again until I got a change that was correct. If I ever did 2, I couldn't undo twice, right? So I learned how to do this nano-incremental development back then, but what I discovered with the roundtable was pretty much nobody else could. The people who did good TDD, test-driven development, straight up XP, hardcore TDD, could do this because you need that. So this exercise I came up with, I said, oh my God, like everybody in the world has to learn this skill, how to take a thing and cut it into little tiny pieces. Now, executives have to cut it into like a 2-year project into quarters. Every 3 months, they should see some change, right? And that's fair. Quarters are very nice. So executives have to learn how to cut a big thing into quarters. Product owners have to cut it down to like 2 weeks or 1 week. And programmers have to cut it down to less than a half a day, or in my class, 8 minutes. So 6 to 8 minutes. So I came up with this exercise, and I will tell you, it's so changing, life-changing, that if I only have 2 hours in a company, I say, please let me do this exercise. I'm not going to change anybody's mind if I give a talk, but I will change a lot of people if I drag them through this exercise. So the first hour, we talk about it. I give them a very simple problem. They have to cut it into 15 to 20 little tiny slices. And we make sure everybody understands it, why, from a business perspective, the flow of money, everything. But then I say, open your laptops, and if you're business people, spreadsheet, and if you're programmers, program. I give them 40 minutes. That's 5 8-minute sprints. And every 8 minutes, they have to give a demo of their running, not tested, but running code to another team. That probably takes 2 minutes, so they actually only have 6 minutes. Now, if they have 20 slices, and we did the math last night, that's 32 minutes of programming time, which basically you have to have implemented a slice every 90 seconds. Okay? And so people go, we can't do that, but then they do that, right? It's very, very intense. And the cool thing is if you've been running 8-minute sprints with a demo, so 6 minutes of programming, 2 minutes of demo, a week looks like a really long time, right? So people say, oh, we can't do 1 week sprints. We just did 8-minute sprints. Now, a week looks like a long time. So this is so changing to people that I do this. In fact, I'm going to a company in Poland tomorrow, and a guy was a junior programmer in 2017, and he said, it changed my life. He's now in charge of 160 programmers. He says, I want you to do that with all 160. So we're doing 4 sets of 40 people to hit 160 people. So everybody knows, business and programmers, how to take any initiative, any assignment, and cut it into little pieces so that you can do fine-grained incremental development from both the business perspective and the technical perspective. And it's still the case today that almost nobody can do this. But there's a thing called solution-focused psychotherapy that we use in the Heart of Agile, and we call it micro-improvements. And so we say, don't try to make a major change to anything. Make little tiny, tiny, tiny steps. There's actually a book called Atomic Habits. And so now it's a theme in self-improvement that you don't try to make big improvements. Start with 1 push-up, right? 1 day, and then 2 push-ups, and maybe 1 sit-up and 1 push-up. I did that back in 2018, and then 6 months later, I was taking CrossFit, right? So baby steps applies not only for the growing the software, but also any personal habits, organizational improvements. I want to anchor that as really a theme around the world these days. Now with AI, I speculate that the slices will be bigger because you can go faster, but when it gets too big, you can't check it. So it's still useful to take it, cut it down, and the best programmers I see, they're checking in their code like every 5 to 10 minutes, and they push to main like every half hour. So even with the AI, the slices might be bigger, but the rates, the time frames are similar. That's it. We call it elephant Carpaccio because the boss comes in and says, we want an elephant. It'll take 1.5 years, but we want to work in like half-hour slices and deliveries every week or 2, let's just say. So we're making Carpaccio from an elephant. That's why it's called elephant Carpaccio. I learned object-oriented design, with the CRC cards from Ward Cunningham Kent Beck. So these guys, as far as I'm concerned, all of the Agile movement is trying to get a group of people to be like Ward and Kent in the late, 1980s. And they wrote this paper on CRC cards, and I learned that, and I started teaching it in 90. I took an advanced design class, from Kent, and I watched Ward work. So these guys are really like in my retina all the time. And so I was in touch with these guys, and we went to the patterns conferences together. So I kind of knew them. And so I was tracking, and then in 97, I went to Oslo to work for the central bank, and that was about the time that Kent was coming out with the results from his C3 project and formalizing XP in 97, 98, Uppsala. So I was tracking that, and Ward's C2.com, WikiWeb, was a place where all the discussions happened. So I was part of all of the discussions around XP. XP is first of all, it's very good, but it kind of ruined our vocabulary because Kent deliberately chose words that were on a scale of like a 1 to 10. They were all 10, right? It's pair programming. Now, we didn't have words. We did a workshop. If you didn't want to do a 10, but you wanted to do an 8, what would you call it? And we don't have words for that. So people say TDD, but they don't do TDD. They do red-green, and they have some tests, and and they're a bit sloppy about it. Now, there's no question. I think that TDD is just fabulous. Well, here's the thing we did one time in a company. I invented a thing called side-by-side programming. So you have 2 people working on 2 workstations. They're each working on their own thing, but they're close enough that they can look at each other's screens. So what happens is you get the productivity of them both typing at the same time, But actually, my friend Jeff Patton was working on something else, and he had his programmer here, and he's working on this. He go, no, you can't do that. I mean, like it's like that, right? And the good news is that's a lot easier to install in a company. You put the things close enough together, and whereas pair programming is fragile, like they just might not do it one day. If the workstations are like this, it's actually harder to undo. So it's more likely to stick. So that's like on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe that's an 8, not even a 9. So the XP practices are fantastic. I encourage people to look for near relatives that are maybe 8 out of 10, but not 10 out of 10. But people are really getting tired of sloppy coding techniques. And if you want tight coding techniques, the extreme programming habits are the best, right? 10 out of 10. Customer on-site, continuous pair programming, automated regression tests, all of those kinds of things. When we came out of the Agile Manifesto writing thing, and I really didn't know Scrum at the time, but about a year later I went, if you distilled all of Agile down, you'd get Scrum, basically. And then people get mad and they said, Scrum's a project management, kind of a advice set. And I go, true. Agile actually is a project management advice set. I want to call it a method, advice set, right? And XP is in the programming subset. And then we'll go, well, people do a sloppy Scrum and they don't have any technical habits, and we are in the software profession. So if we add XP back into the software profession, then that's appropriate, right? But if you're working with a church group on how to get people to attend, congregation, the XP technical habits don't work, and there's other parts of the Heart of Agile or Scrum that fit a social problem. So I think it's appropriate to add XP to the software profession. First of all, this is a great conference, iSAQB. I've been learning things, having great conversations, superb content. And just last night, in the bar, talking with some people with some wine and some beer and stuff, and it occurred to me, we were talking about learning and apprenticeship learning. And apprenticeship learning, you have to have a line of sight to the expert. And normally, all the experts have their own machine, and you can't see what they're doing. You can't see what they're doing, you can't hear. And the question was, with AI, how are the junior people going to become senior people? I went, well, programming's the answer, because you have the expert, right, the senior person and the junior person in the same conversation. You get the apprenticeship learning with line of sight. The key term is legitimate peripheral participation. That's the technical term. And so you have the junior person who's doing something useful. Now, if they're not typing, they're listening. If they're typing, they're being coached to get to hear it. And if the senior person is typing, it's the conversation, so they get to hear it. So with the AI, when you get some LLM and you generate a pile of code and you need the senior person commenting on it, I don't like it because this and this we need to clean up. That's the apprenticeship-based learning for the junior person. And that's the first doorway I've seen for, with the AI generating so much code, how to bring a junior person up to a senior person. So that's what I want to say. Mob at the time, I was go, that's nice. And I read all the stories. I go, that's nice. I'm good. I'm happy for them. But with the AI, this actually solves a problem that we've got. So I'm cool about it.